Hello, YouTube chess fans. This is Joe Bennett. This is a blitz game that I played online. I ended up losing on time, but I got a winning position. And I've been studying this variation in the French defense where black first plays a couple waiting moves like bishop d7 right here, and then queen c7, and eventually after they castle kingside the opponent, and then I play f6, and then at some point wait, but at some point castle queenside and maybe get a kingside attack. There's a video I'll link when Grandmaster Simon Williams recommends this variation, but he recommends it when white plays bishop d3. So bishop e2 is played here, which is a little bit more common. And right now I'm posting this video to say, well, you can play it against bishop e2, and I'm also finding out if it's good for myself when they play bishop e2. I've had some success with it other than this game. Right now I have this Stockfish engine analyzing the position after f6. I'm letting the depth increase. The depth's at 21 right now. And the best line they're saying is bishop to f4 right here at depth 21, and gives white like a 0.26 advantage according to them, and everything else is dead even that they have for the best moves, like bishop on e2 to b5. It's funny that that would be a major candidate, but it is for this engine. Probably to take this knight's pressure off of the center, since f6 is putting so much pressure on the center. And then also they kind of like knight out here, and even at a greater depth they're saying it's a slight edge to white. And in this variation, I guess white would sacrifice the pawn on e5. But that's kind of like an equal line. I don't think many humans will play that. So right now it looks like it's safe to play, I guess, bishop c4 being the most challenging moves. My opponent took on f6, so we'll look at that game in a second, but we'll go with like their major line, c1, f4, and now the pawns are guarded, and they're saying that the knight ought to come out in front of the king right here for black, depth 18. So we'll look at the best lines Stockfish says, and then we'll look at what I'm doing too. So what I'm doing too over here is letting them take on f6, which I'm happy to do. And then I took with the pawn, so I can guard the e5 square and have a bigger pawn presence and maybe attack them on the g file. And then other stuff like that is also preparing for e5 break if they're lazy and I get a super good hold on the center. I took it, obviously, and then they played knight out, threatening to come in and check with the bishop right here. So, oops, sorry about that, guys. So I'm not going to let that check happen because then I won't be able to castle. So then I castle here, and it looks good. It looks like I have a pretty solid position, and there's an open line against their king, and I have a good center presence. Probably have an advantage in this position already. And just going back to this, not to kind of sidetrack and everything, but I'm letting Stockfish get a good depth. It's at depth 22 right here, and then just making the move and seeing how, like, their best moves play out in this line, so we could get a really solid line there. And then this person plays a3, so they're preparing like a kingside attack. A lot of players they try to play this attack, but honestly it's not super duper strong against the black king, which we'll see. So I play my knight out. Knight g6 is looking pretty good because it might rip the h file open and unite my pawns. H file is a little bit better here because my queen's on c7 and it's hitting h2. So this is important part, b4, and then I just lock these pawns with c4. So if he tries to attack me, whenever it's like 2 pawns versus 2 pawns, if they try to pawn storm, they're never really gonna be able to open the line forcefully if you do it right. And if you do it pretty much right, then it takes a lot of work for them to open a line. And usually it just gives you a better position. So now it's just 2 pawns against 2 pawns. So I like this position so much, and I'm happy with it. He moved his knight back to f3, probably anticipating my next move, knight g6. So it's a little dance there, because we would have played that anyway. And I also cleared the space for knight e7. And I probably could have moved knight e7, but I didn't want to block my bishop. So I'm threatening to come in here. It's probably a matter of taste. I like this one a little bit better in blitz. Maybe knight e7 would have been a little bit, more accurate. But I moved here, so I might be getting a piece posted down there. They played a4, marching out the pawns. Let's see what this depth up. Depth 21. It's almost to the highest depth, okay. And so they're doing pawn storms. I come in, threaten the rook. Rook moves up. And then I take the bishop. So I have the bishop pair. And then I'm even going for the other bishop now, too. I'm just saying, I'm not impressed with your game so far. I'm going to get the bishop pair and have stronger pieces. And they guard it with the other rook, so that's doubly guarded now, and I'd snap it. And they have their rooks right there, and I have bishop pair. Pretty sure I have an advantage here. Bishop d6, attacking the king, finally developing fully, and it looks like I have more pawns in the center. I have a slightly weaker pawn right here on e6, but it doesn't really matter because I have the bishop pair. I have stronger pieces, so that pawn on the semi-open file, yet I do have stronger pieces and more center pawns, so I'm willing to accept that weakness for the bishop pair. Okay, the depth got up to 23, so that's good. They're saying b1, a3 in this line. Looks pretty menacing to try to get a knight into this square on d6, but I can always guard that square easy enough. And just to move this along, we'll play a couple moves at just up to 20. a7, a6, e2 to d3. That might not be the best move, so I'll let that cook for a minute. So then he uses his rooks and stuff to get an attack, yet I get the open file fully already on the G file. I wouldn't really mind him continuing the attack just yet, but he does a little defensive move because I have the open G file. And then I open the center because that made his light squares weak and he doesn't have a light square bishop, so I open the center more, which is good. Now I have 2 bishops, really good center, and already an open line on the king, so that opening has been a success so far. Alright, they're still saying at depth 21 that this is the best move. That's good, and then black exchanges in the center. So we have this example game going, and where they play the bishop f4 line. Looks okay. But who really can say just yet? So I'll let that cook even more, marinate with the engine's calculations. So right here, I have a big center, and I have 2 bishops, and I have an open line against the king. Their rooks are in the center, blasting down. It's a little intimidating. I go for the light square attack. The rook's protecting it, and then, still getting light squares. That's a great diagonal for the bishop. I solidify the king side. Queen comes up. So he just dropped a piece there. His attack would not have been successful, so he ended up dropping a piece. Black definitely has an advantage because the bishops, which I keep saying, I know, but just the bishops pair is great asset in the game of chess. People like Fischer and Anand love using their bishops more than knights. They have a preference for them. And those are two world champions right there. And Alekhine had a preference for bishops too. They're tactically sharp. And if you know how to use them well, then you can get a lot done. So I have an advantage, and then he drops a piece, but I can always attack more in this position and do that, or grind them down. It's a big advantage to black, and now that he drops a piece, it's even bigger, so I don't really have to think too much to get an advantage. These moves aren't that important because it splits chess and I already got an advantage. So this endgame advantage, but unfortunately I ran out of time, which kind of stinks. But basically the opening was a success with this new line that I've been developing for the French with this stuff. Alright, and then the stockfish line, let's see. They're saying e7, g6, putting more pressure on e5. I like that move. And then f4, g3, saving the bishop, so the knight doesn't take the bishop. c7, b6, or f6, f5. So this is another interesting thing. Black can go for this attack, which the computer's actually starting to like more and more. And White's advantage that they had before is really going down. After the bishop's committed to the king side like that, then these pawns are going to be a really successful pawn storm. So that's why Stockfish really loves that line. And then eventually black will probably go queen side if they have to, but if they don't have to, then maybe take their time for a pawn storm and play a good game. a3, c2, so bringing the knight back to the center is pretty cool. f8, e7, taking the bishop out. h2, h4. h7, h5, stopping that. d1, d2. So now the advantage is starting to go to black because of the long-term advantages and everything. c7, d8. Yeah, so black ends up winning a pawn. Or do they? e7. Yeah, black ends up not winning a pawn, but messing with that pawn structure, and then able to flick these pawns down. I'm going through this quick, I know, just because I don't want the video to be too long, and this is just an example game. Gave more time to the opening. h4, h3, so they flick in h3, d3, e2, coming back because this pawn had blocked the bishop. c6, e7, knight's coming over. There's probably a bunch of tricks right with that. Stopping b5 if ever and getting some space. h3, g2. So now this line is open. The h file against the king, which is great. King takes back. e8, f7. Okay, so now instead of going queenside, this stockfish, which is the strongest Enyan, pretty much, they just put their king in here and say, like, I doubt you're going to get an attack, and now they're going to use these three pieces for the attack, mainly the rooks and the queen, and see if they can own the h file. So that's really interesting, and in the main line, black has achieved equality here. Very good. So there's those lines in the French, and I'll put like a link in that other part of the YouTube, like bars and everything. It says that the French is pretty good if they play bishop e2 and the French advance, then queen c7, bishop d7, and f6 is a great line. Thank you for watching. My name is Joe Bennett. I hope this helps.